All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football podcast. Today I'll be doing my analysis of Sam Hartman officially committing to Notre Dame, transfers over from Wake Forest. Very successful career, I'd say, with the Demon Deacons, 48 career games, in parts of 5 years. For the most part, it was a 3-year stretch for Hartman, but those 48 games did come over a 5-year span. 12,967 yards, second most in ACC history, 110 touchdowns. Passing is the most in the conference's history. The biggest issue with Sam Hartman, though, is despite all those flashy numbers, is 41 interceptions. And again, 48 career games. That is not a very good rate. Knocking on the door of almost a pick a game, almost. A 59% completion rate all time. Showed good command of this mesh-style offense there at Wake Forest, but, accuracy and decision-making has wavered, and it's, been a big problem for Hartman during his 5 years. He also takes too many sacks, so there's plenty for Tommy Rees to work with. And one big problem at Wake Forest is the scheme, caused his footwork to never always be that great, because, again, it is a mesh-style RPO-type offense. Things are moving fast, and he does have the ability to quickly flip it into small windows or even in space with it, some accuracy and precision. So that's one thing I think is certainly encouraging. I'd say Hartman has a strong arm. He can throw outside the numbers, but in terms of generating great velocity downfield, not as much. Maybe with some improved mechanics, he can certainly start to air it out a little bit more. But, he showed great command of that offense there at Wake Forest, and I think he's going to be able to come into Tommy Rees' system, and, he's going to be able to understand it very quickly, and I think he's going to showcase the leadership, and that's something they need at quarterback. Tyler Buckner, I thought he was really good in the Gator Bowl. Drew Pine, not so much during his time at Notre Dame over the last 2 years. Not much of a great leader, not really more than an average quarterback either. He's off to Arizona State. So Hartman does still have to beat out Tyler Buckner, who, again, was very good in that bowl game. He's also very good with his legs, especially with his size. That's one thing that's really impressive about Buckner is his ability to run. Looking back at Hartman, though, this is a run-heavy offense. It's going to utilize the tight ends a lot of inside running as well, plenty of 12 personnel. I don't think I've ever seen Hartman under center, so he's going to have to adjust to Tommy Rees' scheme a good bit. A handful of RPOs are mixed in there as well, but mainly this is a check-down passing game to running backs, tight ends. You see a lot of screens. They utilize a variety of concepts to get vertical as well. But for the most part, this is a team that's what they do. It's a short passing game. They run the football. They love to use physicality. Only 4 passing plays of 40-plus yards this past season. That was 117th in FBS. That's the same rank as UConn and Iowa, so that's certainly not very encouraging one bit. Personnel wide receiver wasn't exactly a strong suit either. Michael Mayer, of course, he was a big-time tight end for them. Lorenzo Styles, a former highly rated recruit, didn't exactly have that breakout year either. Avery Davis, of course, he was injured coming into this with a torn ACL. Braden Lenzy was a senior. Jaden Thomas, a freshman, did step up. He was the second leading pass catcher. He's going to be the top returning pass catcher for next season. 25 grabs, 361 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And then Logan Diggs, he was the guy that's 5th on the team in receptions, or yards rather. He did have 10 receptions. But Chris Tyree also, he had 24 grabs, that's actually 4th, and tied for 4th with Lenzy. So this is a team, again, that utilized the running backs a lot. Production from the wide receivers was not evident. Tight end, it's going to be a big impact position for them that they're going to have to find ways to account for Mayer's production disappearing. It's only 800 yards and 9 touchdowns, which, doesn't seem like, the most outlandish type of production, but from a tight end in college football, that's up there. He did not win the John Mackey Award, but he was, I believe, the highest graded tight end by PFF, and he was a finalist for the award. So he's not going to have guys like A.T. Perry, there's a very, Donovan Green, he had a very deep pass-catching group at Wake Forest. Taylor Morton, they had 5 different guys. I think they had 500-plus yards. So the production was wild at Wake Forest through a passing attack. It's going to be interesting to see how this works out, though, because Hartman, he's going to come into a situation at Notre Dame where they're getting 2 phenomenal tackles back, Blake Fisher and Joe Alt, the interior offensive line. I believe they're out of eligibility. Guys like Zeke Correll. The defense, they lose a good bit, it seems like. There's a lot of seniors on that unit. It remains to be seen who's going to have eligibility. That's one thing that's hard to figure out in college football nowadays. But if I had to guess, for the most part, the defense is certainly going to lose a lot of guys. So this is going to be big for Marcus Freeman. Tommy Rees' offense the last 2 years, they've really struggled early on in the year. The first half of the season, this was just a horrendous unit. They did not do very good against Ohio State, only 10 points. Lost to Marshall, less than 300 yards against Cal. Finally got things clicking against UNC and BYU and wins, and they turned around and dropped a dud, only 14 points and a loss to Stanford. But after that, they had 30-plus in every single game, besides the USC game where they had 27. and they were able to take 45 on South Carolina in the bowl game. So that's one thing that's certainly been a theme with this program is the last 2 years. The offense in the first half of seasons, mainly in September, has just not been good. You remember in 2021, they had some good yardage totals, 449. That was against Toledo. That was a close game where the offense really struggled. They were able to survive against Florida State, even though the offense could not run the ball in that one. Beat Wisconsin due to a strong defensive effort in that fourth quarter. They only had 3 rushing yards in that one, and they only scored 13 the next week against Cincinnati. The rest of the year, they started to get things going on the ground. They had 3 different games of 200-plus rushing. This isn't 2021, of course, but that's just been a consistent theme so far of Notre Dame the last 2 years. His offense in September and mainly the first half of the season just not very good, and that's something that Hartman's going to come in and try to correct. But I don't know if that's going to be evident with him trying to adjust the Tommy Rees's scheme. I think you're going to be in store for another struggle to the first 4 to 6 games of the year with this big change coming. So that's certainly something I think Marcus Freeman's going to have to try to do a better job of, is getting this offense in sync, in tune early on in the year, because I thought they were pretty good in the back half of the season. And as they get Ohio State, I believe it's week 3 next year. And if the defense has to replace a lot, the offense is going to have some more heavy lifting to do. So I think this is certainly going to be a good fit. I don't know if it's a great one, but I think overall, if it doesn't work early, a lot of things are going to be, a lot of question marks are going to be raised about Marcus Freeman in this job. And it was a very bumpy start for him, losing to Marshall, of course, despite, a pretty valiant effort against Ohio State. Things really went downhill after that game. And they were able to correct it, and they were able to go on a winning streak to end the season. But Marcus Freeman, they could potentially, I do think he has had a great recruiting class coming in this year, and beating Clemson was very impressive. And, of course, that was a ranked win over South Carolina. But the back half of the year when the offense started clicking, they didn't play nobody. Syracuse, UNLV, again, they lost to Stanford. Navy, they only beat them by 3 points. Boston College, just not very good football teams. The final 2 games of the year, I think, was certainly something that's impressive, going head-to-head with USC on the road, and then, again, the Gator Bowl victory. But I don't know. Notre Dame right now, I think this is a very tough situation for them to be in. This is obviously a big-time addition. Tyler Buckner, he's a very young quarterback. Obviously, you're going to get an upgrade in experience here. But can Hartman carry this football team next year? I'm not sure if he can with, the limited weapons, the production from the receivers this year, the lack of big plays, having to adjust to the scheme. It's going to be an interesting storyline to watch. So a lot of people are going to think that Notre Dame's going to go to the playoff or something with this addition, but I don't see that happening. Of course, we won't make a prediction on this team for another 7 or 8 months, and we'll see how I feel come preseason 2023. But first glance, first thoughts, I think this is a good fit, but not great. But I think Reese, he's going to be more prone to call things that fit into Hartman's repertoire, and I think they may look to generate some more space with their wide receivers. But again, I don't think it's a great fit, but having a veteran under center benefited them with Jack Cohen a couple years ago, who I thought was a solid fit, but I thought his ceiling had already been met, because this was a similar scheme that Wisconsin runs. They're a little bit more creative, and they certainly open it up a little bit more than the Badgers do. But Cohen had a phenomenal season back in 2020, 2021 rather. He had 3,100 yards, 25 touchdowns when he replaced Ian Book, who was the starter in 2020 and a couple years prior. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think Cohen, I was very impressed what Reese was able to do with him. So maybe that veteran leadership that Hartman brings, you're going to see a repeat performance of that. So that's going to be my final thoughts on this one. Cohen did have 509 yards and 5 scores in the bowl game against Oklahoma State that year also. So this is a guy, at the end of his tenure, he had 3 straight 300-yard passing games, and, final career game was 500 plus. So we'll see what happens. I think Hartman, again, he's going to get better as the season goes on, but early on in the season, they're going to have to survive the storm, because that's certainly been a problem with them the last 2 years. Hartman, good fit, not great. It's going to be it for today's episode, guys. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.